Welcome to Biology of Marine Mammals. I'm Dr. Leslie Williams, and this lecture covers pinniped mating systems. In this lecture, we're going to first look at the spectrum of mating systems, ranging from monogamy to extreme polygamy, and then we'll take a look at which factors influence the selection of mating systems. In other words, when is a system going to be monogamous and when is a system going to be polygamous? And finally, we'll tie that back into breeding space, including land breeders versus ice breeders. To start, let's introduce some definitions. Polygamy is defined as the act when one male mates with many females. Now in pinnipeds, the gender ratios are equal. In other words, there's 50% females and 50% males. This means that almost all females that are of reproductive age will be reproductive in any given breeding year. But what this sets up is an inequality among males. Since one male ends up with access to many females, there's competition between males for that access. Therefore, not all males are going to be successful. For example, if you have a male that is able to reproduce with 60 females, this leaves another 59 males wanting for access to females. Again, this sets up competition, and because there's competition between males, this is a type of sexual selection. As a result, we end up usually with what's called sexual dimorphism between males and females, where males assume a very large size because they're in constant competition, and so we always favor the larger size. The larger size gets to be the winner of a particular harem. Between males, again, and females. Sometimes we also see some secondary sexual characteristics, such as a pendulous nose among the northern elephant seals that shows up only in the male bulls and not in the females. In contrast, monogamy is going to be where one male mates with just one female during a breeding season. Because there's no competition between males for access to multiple females, there's very little sexual selection, and therefore there is limited or no sexual dimorphism. In other words, the males and the females look pretty much the same. So the spectrum of mating systems goes all the way from monogamy to extreme polygamy, where you get one male mating with many, many, many females, to everything in between, such as slight polygamy, where you might get one male that usually mates with the female, but maybe two, to moderate polygamy. Again, the rule of thumb is the more pronounced the polygamy, the more extreme the sexual dimorphism is going to be. In northern elephant seals, for example, the males are much, much larger than the females. And we also see that with the California sea lions, where the male bulls are considerably larger than the females. You move over to the monogamous side of things, and the males and females look almost the same. Mating systems are not determined at random. So the question is, what factors are going to influence which mating system a particular pinniped species uses? So the first thing we need to do is make this observation. All pinnipeds give birth on land or ice. In other words, none of them give birth in the water. And actually most copulate on land or ice as well, although a few may copulate in the water also. So the rule of thumb is that it is the distribution of reproductive females that determines the male access, and therefore competition to such access. So what determines the distribution of reproductive female seals? It's actually the breeding habitat geography. So let's turn to the breeding habitat and see if we can elucidate how breeding habitat influences the mating system. The first thing we need to do is actually categorize breeding habitat. As a rule, there are three types of breeding habitat. There's land, and there's then two types of ice. For the two types of ice, we break that into pack ice and fast ice. Pack ice is floating ice, which forms and then breaks up, and then fast ice is going to be ice attached to land. So now we're going to take a look at some statistics among 33 pinniped species that were evaluated for their mating strategies. We're going to start with the pinnipeds that breed on land, of which there are 20 of the 33. So when we look at these 20 pinniped species that breed on land, 18 of them, a whopping 18 of them, show a high degree of polygamy. In other words, either moderate polygamy or extreme polygamy. And interestingly enough, this includes all the otariids that were evaluated and several phocids, including the northern and southern elephant seals. Now, the two other land breeders, so there's 2 of 20, are going to only show slight polygamy, and this includes the Hawaiian monk seals. And we're going to come back to the Hawaiian monk seals at the very end and take a look at why they're the exception that actually proves the rule. So what about the pinnipeds that breed on ice? Interestingly, the pinnipeds that breed on ice are going to be all phocids and also the walrus. Now, 11 of these 13 species employ either monogamy or slight polygamy. So this sets up a very interesting dichotomy. If you breed on ice, you tend to be much more towards the monogamy side. If you breed on land, you tend to be very much towards the polygamy side. So what is it about ice versus land that supports this dichotomy? So we're going to start with the question, why are land breeders polygamous? So the answer lies, again, in the breeding site geography. The rule is that suitable land breeding sites are actually rare, because historically, if you had a seal that came out or an otariid that came out and gave birth, and they can't leave their pups, they're susceptible to land predators such as grizzly bears or wolves. So they had to always come out into areas where terrestrial predators couldn't get at their pups. And so these sites are actually very rare. You either have to have a mainland site that's protected by high cliffs or island sites. Because these sites are rare, all the females that come out at any given time during a breeding season usually go for the same sites. In other words, there's competition between females for site access. This leads to a whole bunch of females crowding into a few selected sites all at the same time, which means males have access to a huge number of reproductively receptive females all at once. And this, of course, is going to lead to competition, because males want to inseminate as many females as they can in a breeding season. And since there's basically a huge cluster of them, they're going to fight with each other for access to those females. This sets up the polygamy system. Now, among those pinnipeds that show extreme polygamy, we actually have 2 different subcategorizations. Those where the males established dominance hierarchies, and those where the males established territories. Now, northern elephant seals are one species where you see dominance hierarchies. In other words, the males come out, fight with each other, and establish a dominance ranking, an alpha bull, a beta bull, and then some subordinate bulls within a given region. California sea lions, which also show kind of a moderate to extreme polygamy system, set up something different called territories, where the males come out and basically the biggest and best males stake out the best territories. And so what's really interesting is that in any given breeding season, only a few males will actually be successful in establishing some type of dominance or their own territory, and thus controlling a harem or a collection of females. For example, in northern elephant seals, it's estimated that only between 5 and 30% of the males at any time in their life will actually be in control of a dominance hierarchy. So this brings up, of course, the counter question, which is, why are ice breeders monogamous? And the answer, again, is in topography or geography. When you're looking at ice, there's a lot more suitable ice. So because there's a lot of potential breeding space, females come out and they have their choice of where they want to be. And this leads to females being spread out among all the different patches of ice. Now, this leads to basically a lot of females spread out. And you can see in this picture here, we have a ribbon seal that's come out, and there's not another ribbon seal in sight. So this leads to a lot of females coming out for the breeding season and being very, very spread out. If this is true, then a male that wants to inseminate multiple females is only going to be with a female who's an estrus for a very short amount of time and doesn't have the ability to control another female that could be located thousands of meters away or even maybe miles away. In other words, they can't tell other males, hey, back off, that's my female. female too. And so because of that, really a male just sticks with a female, protects that one female while she pups and gives birth, and then copulates with her as the breeding season comes to an end. And so this spread outness of the females leads to the monogamy systems. Now, interestingly, as a little aside, breeding seasons are very short on ice, and this is usually because the ice is only stable for a certain amount of time, and then it will break up, and the pups of course need that stable ice. So as a result, some of the breeding seasons are as short as 2 weeks. In other words, the females give birth, they lactate for only 7 to 14 days, which is a very short amount of time. They copulate and then they're done. And so usually for ice breeders, you tend to see shorter breeding seasons as well, which also leads to the idea that a male just has to stick with that one female and not worry about trying to get access to the other females. Now, Hawaiian monk seals, as I mentioned earlier, are the exception that sort of proves the rule. In Hawaiian monk seals, what you have is a land breeder that is also only shows slight polygamy. In other words, it doesn't show the extreme polygamy we see with most land breeders. So what is it about Hawaiian monk seals and their particular distribution that is actually encouraging only a slightly polygamous system rather than extreme polygamy? And the answer is actually twofold. First and foremost, there's really no terrestrial predators on the Hawaiian Islands that they have to worry about, which means that there's plenty of breeding space. So again, this leads to a very spread out distribution of females, which, as we already mentioned, supports the monogamy side of things. But there's another factor as well. These phocids feed year-round, and they have very long lactation periods, unlike most phocids. So their lactation periods can be 8 months or more, which means their reproductive cycles are not timed. It isn't like in a given month, all the females come into estrus, as we see with the northern elephant seals. Rather, it's more like at any given time, a particular female might be in estrus for a couple days. So male Hawaiian monk seals will actually go from beach to beach to beach, kind of barking out and looking for any receptive female that they find. And if they encounter that rare female in estrus, they actually then will go ahead and mate with her. But because all the females are coming into estrus when they're receptive at different times, you can't get one male that's going to control a harem of females. So it's more just luck of the draw. Did you happen to come across a receptive female during the 2 or 3 days out of the year that she is receptive? If so, lucky you. If not, move on and try and find another female. And so that basically explains why a couple of our land breeders are going to actually show a different strategy rather than the more extreme polygamy. And with that, I will see you next time.